Part 1. There is no antimemetics division. We need to talk about 55.
Can I smoke? This time the receptionist narrows her eyes at Marion. No, she says. No, you can't smoke anywhere on Site 200. Just because it's an administration building doesn't mean we don't have lungs or labor law. Marion notices the exasperation on the young woman's face. I've asked you that before, haven't I? Twice in the last quarter hour, the receptionist says. You must really need a smoke. She's genuinely puzzled at the repeated question, and she's doing a bad job of concealing her puzzlement. You think this is like Memento, don't you? Marion offers, feeling charitable. You think I have no long-term memory, and if I stay in one place for too long, I forget why I'm there. The receptionist is only just old enough to remember that film. I guess? Marion smiles sympathetically and shakes her head. It's nothing so simple. Minutes pass. She toys obsessively with her lighter. She's turning 50 this year and slowly graying, well on her way out of the petite towards little old lady. In her bag, her phone beeps because it's time for a pill, but she tells it to remind her later. There's a slight tremble in her fingers, but that's not age-based infirmity. That's just ordinary nerves. She's nervous because she's here to meet an 05, and 05s are scary. 05s never want to see you for a small thing. It's the end of the world or nothing. Finally, 40 minutes late, the door to the inner office opens. 4 or 5 high-ranked foundationers spill out carrying laptops or briefcases. As a group, they head straight past reception and out to cars, which are waiting. Marion recognizes a few of the faces. The Site 19 director, the head recruiter for Western Europe. None of them glance in her direction. Once they're gone, 058's assistant pokes his head around the door. He's 20-something, improbably young, like a teenager stuffed into one of his dad's business shirts. His haircut is barely regulation. In one hand, he holds a tablet computer showing his boss's daily planner. It's packed. The man evidently does not sleep.
Marion, you can come through now.
The office door behind them closes behind them with an unusually heavy mechanical clunk, as if the whole thing is part of a machine built into the office walls. While Marion takes the indicated chair and sets her bag down, the assistant turns and does some confusing additional things to the door, causing it to make several further strange noises. 05s have non-trivial privacy and security requirements. The office is spacious, but somehow contrives to be dark despite two corners of window and broad daylight outside. The walls are all bookshelves and dark wood paneling. Perfectly stylish, but it's a style from the 90s, a little worn, and not yet old enough to be fashionable again. As for the fellow behind the desk, well, an 05 never looks like you imagine. Marion takes a deep breath. So what's the topic? All I got was the meeting invitation. No agenda, no subject. I mean, an 05 says jump, you jump, but... Looking to her right, she notices that the assistant, without saying anything or making any undue noise, has set down his tablet on a table, produced a gun, and aimed it at her head. Marion stops talking. She sits still in her chair for a little while, absorbing the change of pace, letting her heart rate raise to a hummingbird's, and then start to flatten again. Okay, she hazards. She licks her lips and grips the armrests, otherwise staying perfectly still, waiting for another prompt. The assistant's face is totally neutral now, like this is just how meetings go. Maybe it is for people up here.
Who are you?
Marion blinks. What? Oh. Oh, God.
Let me rephrase. Marion Wheeler, 49, with loving husband and 2 boys in tow. Likes camping, hiking, and ornithology. Boring mother with perfect airtight background in financials as far back as we can examine, and you've got full foundation credentials, which we've never issued, including access to a list of installations and rooms which some of these locations don't exist, or were torn down decades ago. At least one hasn't been built yet. Yet you've got the front door key to it. That's before we get to your SCP access control lists, which I can only term as egregious. So, you're a spy, and your objectives are misaligned with ours. And Clay wanted to cut Z3 loose on you, but I was able to bring him around. I talked him into a face-to-face. I thought there was a slim chance that if we locked you in a bomb-proof room and asked politely, you'd have the good sense to spare yourself the rest.
Marion has long since stopped listening. You dullard, she says, now that she can finally speak. I'm your chief of antimemetics.
We don't have an antimemetics division.
Clay says. Yes, you do. We do.
We have a memetics division, a telecontainment division, fire services, Ops A, Ops B, personnel, D personnel, and 24 others. We don't have an anti-memetics division.
Do we have an irony division? She hesitates, hopefully. No? All right, we'll try this. Why do you think the anti-memetics division would show up in the listing?
This is just a cover story.
Clay says to 058, not taking his eyes off Marion.
It's a good one, but she's had it worked out in advance. Clay, lose the piece,
says the 05. Grudgingly, Clay does so. Marion fractionally relaxes. There are SCPs with dangerous memetic properties. They are contagious concepts, which require containment just like any physical threat. They get inside your head and ride your mind to reach other minds. Right?
Right.
058 says. He could name a score of SCPs fitting this description without even thinking. There are SCPs with anti-memetic properties, Marion continues. There are ideas which cannot be spread. There are entities and phenomena which harvest and consume information, particularly information about themselves. You take a Polaroid photo of one, it'll never develop. You write a description down with a pen on paper and hand it to someone, but what you've written turns out to be hieroglyphics and nobody can understand it, not even you. You can look directly at one, and it won't even be invisible, but you'll still perceive there's nothing there. Dreams you can't hold on to, and secrets you can never share, and lies and living conspiracies. It's a conceptual subculture of ideas consuming other ideas, and sometimes segments of reality, sometimes people, which makes them a threat. That is all there is to it, really. Anti-memes are dangerous, and we don't understand them. Therefore, they are a part of the problem. Hence my division. We do the sideways thinking that's needed to combat something which can literally eat your combat training. 058 stares back at her for a long moment. Clay fidgets, disliking and distrusting the story, but 05 seems more open to the concept.
Name one,
he says.
Name an anti-memetic SCP.
SCP-055.
There is no SCP-055.
Again. Yes, there is.
There isn't. SCP numbers aren't assigned sequentially. There are gaps. That number hasn't been assigned. It's not superstition. We have enough to be concerned about without arbitrary numerological mysticism. We have SCP-666. We have SCP-13, but there is no SCP-001, and there is no SCP-055. Clay.
058 says.
You should look at this.
He turns his monitor so Clay can see the file that he has just retrieved. Sorry, Naomi, you distracted me. Clay bends over and reads it from top to bottom. Stunned, he scrolls back and reads it all a second time.
But The file's dated from 2008. It's got all the right flags and signatures. It's keyed. It's coded. It's real. You've seen this before.
Clay asks him.
Never in my life.
058 replies.
As far as I can remember, anyway. On the other hand, if the content is accurate, both of us have probably seen it dozens of times.
Clay stares at Marion.
This isn't possible.
She nearly spits. For Christ's sake, Clay, how long have you been working here?
But if this SCP is this powerful...
Yes?
Who wrote the file? The
05 finishes.
And for that matter, how do you, Mrs. Wheeler, retain knowledge of any of this?
The file was written by a man named Dr. Bartholomew Hughes. He's dead.
What happened to him?
You do not want to know. There's a very long pause while both 058 and his assistant react to this. In fact, they pass through a long, discrete sequence of reactions. Indignation at the seeming rudeness, confusion at Wheeler's incaution in front of sinister superiors, surprise at the magnitude of the claim, pure disbelief, comprehension, and finally, horror.
What
058 asks very carefully.
Would happen if we did know?
It would happen to you as well, Marion says, levelly. As for your other question, we manage that pharmacologically. You know, we have Class A amnestics for people who are very badly need to forget things. Of course you do. Who could forget about Class A amnestics? Well, in antimemetics, we have a different pill for people who need to remember things that would otherwise be impossible to remember. Mnemestics, class W, X, Y, and Z. Same Greek root as the word mnemonic. The M is silent. In her bag, Marion's phone beeps again. With a nod of approval from the 05, Marion reaches into her bag and turns her phone off, acknowledging the prompt this time instead of postponing it. She pulls a blister pack from another pocket and pops out a pill. It's hexagonal and green. She holds it up and is satisfied to see a flicker of recognition on 058's face. He's beginning to put it back together. These are Class M mnestics, the weakest, suitable for continuous use. I'm sorry, that's Class W, suitable for continual use. 2 pills per day. Go down to the pharmacy site and ask. The pharmacist will claim they don't stock any such thing. They're misremembering. Tell them to double check. 058 sighs.
Now, I think I get it. I see why we're having this conversation at all.
Yes, Marion says, popping a second pill out and handing it over to him. It's because you missed a dose. You're supposed to be on these, the same as me and everybody on my staff. It's the only way we can work. You forget to take a pill, and then you forgot all the information that the pills were helping you retain. You forgot why you were taking them, who gave them to you, where to get more. You forget about me and my entire department. And now I have to bring you up to speed.
And if I take this,
058 says,
I'll remember this whole conversation and we won't have to have it again.
Hopefully not. Clay pipes up.
Should I be taking those? Sorry, kiddo.
058 adds.
Need to know. Maybe when you're in 05 yourself.
He swallows the pill, and Marion swallows her, too.
So, what is SCP-055?
SCP-055 is nothing, Marion says, now relaxing entirely. SCP-055 is, as described in the file, a powerful information autosuppressor. As far as experimentation has uncovered, it can only be defined in negative terms. We can only record what it isn't. We know it isn't classified as safe or Euclid. We know it isn't round or square or green or silver. We know it isn't stupid. And we know it isn't alone. But we do know is that it's weak. It's weak because it's the only antimemetic agent in our possession which has a physical entry in the files. We have paper records of the thing, We have containment procedures. It's not safe, which means it's dangerous, but it's contained. 058 blinks.
You have procedures? Where?
Marion points at her head.
Then how many other anti-memes are there? How much more dangerous do they get?
10 than I know of, Marion says. Statistically, probably at least 5 more that I don't know of. This does not count the antimemetic entities freely roaming the halls, not under containment. There are at least 2 in this room with us right now. Don't look, I said don't look. It's pointless. 058 does an impressive job of controlling himself, keeping his attention focused on Marion. Clay doesn't fare so well and quickly sweeps the whole room, even checking behind his back. Making an ass of himself, essentially. He finds nothing. He looks baffled. There is an invisible monster which follows me around and likes to eat my memories, Marion explains with patience. SCP-4987. Don't look it up, it's not there. I've learned to manage it. It's like a demanding pet. I produce tasty memories on purpose so it doesn't eat something important, like my passwords or how to make coffee.
And what's the other one?
Clay asks. With a nod from 058, Marion goes to her bag again. This time she pulls out a gun and shoots Clay twice in the heart. More aghast than in pain, Clay collapses sharply against the bookcase behind him. Pulling his head around to face Marion, he manages...
How did you know?
Marion stands, aims more carefully, and shoots him a 3rd time, this time in the head. 058 again does an impressive job of not reacting.
That's Clay's gun. You stole it from him.
It's tricky to steal a firearm this heavy from someone without them noticing, Marion explains, unloading it and carefully setting it down. But stealing a firearm and then stealing their memory of the theft is a little easier. Like I said, a pet. Some pets are dumb enough that they can be trained.
Yes. That much I'd guessed. But why?
Because you were supposed to be taking Class W Nemestics. You can't skip a dose of Class W. I've tried. You can postpone a dose, but you can't forget unless someone actively prevents you from taking it. There's only one person who could get close enough to you to do that, and that's your assistant. And remember when I asked him how long he'd been working here?
He didn't answer.
058 says.
I thought you were being rhetorical.
He doesn't work here. He's an anti-meme. Since when do you have an assistant? You don't have an assistant, Brent. Look at this office. It's got one desk. You've got a receptionist outside. She's the one who screens your calls and schedules your meetings. Where does Clay even sit? Where does he fit? Don't blame yourself. You're human. And these things are redaction incarnate. You need to think like a space alien to get around them. 058 asks a question which in any other workplace would be absurd.
Is he dead?
Maybe. I can put his corpse in our research queue and we'll see what we can see when we open him up. There's a duality here, though. They're like parallel universes sharing the same space. It's conceptual versus concrete, figurative versus physical. Figurative versus physical. I don't know what Clay was, but he had a human body, which instantly makes him weird, even by our standards. As ever, the search for stalemate continues. I will let you know if we get any closer.
Any side effects of these pills?
058 asks. Nausea and dramatically increased risk of pancreatic cancer, she says. And very, very bad dreams. And that's the end of our chapters.